Where we go with you, babe, go with you, babe. Going.
As usual, I started with the first and most important part of any composition or any song, and that is the chord progression as usual. And Mura Masa, however you pronounced it, likes to use a lot of grand pianos, so that's what I chose. I used the Ableton built-in grand piano since it's pretty good, and I added some reverb to make it more realistic, and I can go ahead and play it with the reverb and then without. So again, reverb is something that is useful for a lot of different things, including adding realism and some more realistic aspects to your different sound design. So anyways, we're gonna go ahead and listen to the first chord progression that I made. So it's actually weird with the bass notes at the bottom, but we can go ahead and take them off. And basically the same thing repeats again, and then at the end I have some notes that are going upwards, so kind of a rising effect at the end makes it sound a little bit sharper. But the scale that in which this song is written right now is D sharp major, and I'm not sure I really like that scale, so I think I'm gonna change it in a second. But here is the second progression I came up with. It's on the offbeat. That's something that Mura Masa likes to use a lot. A lot of producers like to do this, is have an offbeat chord progression. It adds some movement and it makes the song a lot more upbeat. And as you can tell, it's at 136 BPM, because I feel that's something that he does, is has higher BPM in his songs. But anyways, this is the second chord progression. So let's go ahead and turn on the metronome so you can hear. So as you can tell, these ones are grayed out because I pressed 0 on them. If you select something and press the number 0, it'll turn it off, because I felt like it was clashing a little bit and it didn't sound right. So if we layer them, they sound like they work roughly. So yeah, they definitely work together, but I believe that later on I'm gonna have something going on where I can separate them, because I don't really like the way they sound layered. But as well as all that, I added a melody. I used the good old Lounge Lizard electric piano plugin to go ahead and make this layer, and it sounds better without this instrument. So interesting sounding. But again, I wanted to change the progression. I feel like it would sound better lower, because all the chords sound a little bit too high. So something you can do is produce in a scale that you're comfortable in first, and for me it was D sharp major or C minor, and then you can go ahead and move the notes down or up however you want them to, and they'll sound in harmony still. Let's see what else there is. So you get kind of a house kind of feel. I'm gonna go ahead and keep it at D sharp major. And since I'm comfortable in that scale, and what I'm gonna go ahead and do is, I think right away we can start adding another instrument right now. I'm trying to think what direction we can move in currently. I'll be back in like 1 second because I gotta check this video anyways to see if it's even recording well. Here's the thing, we have this instance of Serum on the track, and at this point I'm starting to work on the drop a little bit, and what I want is to create a really crisp sounding sound, and as you can tell, I kind of made one, but to go ahead and demonstrate for the people that would like to make a similar sound after watching the video, I'm gonna go ahead and start over. So Mura Masa likes to use a lot of saws and those kind of sounds with filters over them, which is something that I've used in other videos as well. And to create that kind of the best sounding sound that's like that, you want a crisp bass sound or a crisp foundation. So what that would mean is starting with like a saw wave or a sawtooth wave, and then changing that to make it more crisp. And how I found the technique I found to work for that is to add a lot of harmonics just randomly, or in certain places on the oh my god, I can't even speak, on the wave, and you immediately get a more crisp sound. And I mean, there's no like exact way to do this kind of stuff, but sometimes I like to mess around as well. I don't mess around with the peaks too much because then it kind of messes with the volume a little bit. I mean, I'm no expert, but it's always good to mess around. See, I feel like that's a little bit too much, and that kind of thickens it. It's all by ear. So anyways, so for this, I'll get this kind of a sound, and then I would detune, I would add some more, make it into a super saw, and blend it perfectly with the rest so it's all flat. And I apologize if that's really loud. I hope it doesn't bleed through the mic either, but then you get a nice foundation. This is like a bedding for the rest of the sound. It's like a flat surface. It's like the foundation. So then over it I would add another saw, since obviously saws are pretty crisp sounds. I want to have more focus in the sound and make it more direct. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I want it to be more solid of a sound rather than all smoothed out. So lower the sound of the super saw. I lower it, and then I add a sawtooth. So I added some distortion as well in the other one. I really messed around with a lot of the different ones, but I found that a little bit of downsampling is pretty good for adding crispness. Now keep in mind that I was trying to make a crisp sound this whole time, so that's how I came up with this. You gotta have an idea first. You can't just get in and mess everything up, or not mess everything up, but mess around. So I mean, that's the essence of the whole sound. I believe I added some EQ and added some more highs, or boosted the gain up a little bit so it would be a little bit more crisp. But obviously this was kind of a quick little demonstration, so I'm going to use the actual thing, the actual sound that I made earlier. So basically the same thing with the same kind of thing going on here, and then Of course, I turned up the release a little bit so that it would fade off. But anyways, that was the sound. And real quick, we can demonstrate it. So yeah, we have a really crisp foundation. So now we can get into the filtering effect, which is, like I said, something that he likes to use a lot, is the filters. And as you can tell, the crispness really adds to the emphasis of this effect. Like, it really emphasizes the filtering. If it was like a sound that wasn't as crisp, it wouldn't sound as nice. But anyways, you can boost up the resonance to get that hollow effect. But anyways, I need to think a little bit more. I can actually start right now. I have an idea for a progression, for a rhythm. So the whole thing that you need to keep in mind when you're doing this kind of filter stuff is rhythm, because that's what the filter is for, is to add rhythm, and you'll get what I'm talking about in a sec. So it's all by hand. And you know what, it would be a good idea to add a metronome just so I could keep track of the beats. Oh man, this is so tough to just control it. What in the world? Alright, I'm gonna come back in a sec when I have something down that makes sense. Right, so I finished setting up the auto filter, and it's gonna sound very familiar, very similar, I should say, to the Carmack one, because it's basically just a basic eighths pattern. On every eighth it does it. So as you can tell, very basic. I don't think I'm end up using this exact rhythm, but when we turn up the resonance, you can hear a different effect as well, just to demonstrate, just in case you want to use this in some of your sound design. When you turn up the resonance, it adds kind of a hollow effect. But for this kind of Mura Masa type thing, it sounds more, there's little to no resonance, and if anything, he uses volume automation rather than the filter, but I guess this could work as well. And what I wanted to demonstrate is adding variation. So just like you can add velocity to different notes, you can add velocity to your automation with your filter by turning down the frequencies even more, so it'll sound more aggressive sounding. So now we get kind of a cutting off effect. It sounds almost like a sidechain effect, and now we're kind of separating ourselves from the Carmack song a little bit. I don't want to intentionally make the same thing over and over. And we kind of like this Mura Masa sound. So honestly, really cool. I could play with this for a little bit, but I want to move on. I'm actually just gonna, did I duplicate this over? No, I'm gonna have to do this manually as well. So as you can tell, when you move this around, it kind of gives this, it's not really changing the velocity, but it gives that kind of a vibe off, and it adds some variation, which is something that you really want. And obviously I did this by hand, so it sounds very natural sounding and not robotic. You could also do it in a fashion where you could just duplicate the same wave over and over, and it would just be a straight thing like that, but that sounds very robotic. And this gives it kind of a swing, you know. But the next thing I'm gonna do, this is gonna be a background sound. Honestly, I don't want it to be in the forefront of the whole thing. So honestly, I want to work on a bass line at this point, and I could obviously go with the traditional hip hop sub that I always go with. It's a great sound, but I think this time around we could go ahead and make one ourselves, just so I could demonstrate how that's made. So we're gonna start with a brand new instance of Massive, and of course I'm gonna turn down the volume so it's not bleeding through my microphone from my studio monitors. So we're gonna start with a sine wave, of course. So as you can tell, it says sine square. What that means is that the wavetable position will go from a full sine wave to a square wave, depending on where it is, and everywhere in between, depending on where you put it. So we're gonna start with full sine, turn it down 12, which is an octave, and that's basically what a sub is just a sine wave. But what I like to do is double up on it, get a sine square again, and then move the wavetable up just a little bit, take this down to 12 as well, and then we get kind of a sound that has a little bit more harmonics. So a sine wave is a smooth kind of sound, and a square is more it has more of a higher tone to it. So as you can tell, there's more harmonics, so when you take it up a little bit, you get a little bit more of a saturated sound. Now as well, you need some distortion, and not too much, of course. And I guess you could play around with it until it sounds right. But I like to also add some distortion up here. I'm not exactly sure which one I'm gonna end up using, but anyways, you can go to the EQ, of course, as well. And since it's a low sound, it's a bass sound, we want to boost the low shelf a little bit. This knob right here tells Massive where the split is between high and low. I'll keep it just in the middle, and then of course I take down the high shelf. So without the high shelf, you get all these really high sounds, and then when you take it down, it kind of muffles it a little bit, which is nice. I'm gonna take down the volume, and then since it is a bass sound, you don't want to have bass chords because that just sounds messy as heck, unless you have a specific sound that you're trying to achieve. But of course there's legato, and then what I like to do is turn up the attack a little bit so that there's no clipping. Sometimes the level will be down like this. That's not good at all. You want to have it all the way up so it's a constant sound, and then the release up a little bit as well. And then you got a basic sub sound. But anyways, we're gonna go ahead and make a bass line. So as you can tell with this chord progression, I have all these notes down here on the piano part, those are basically the bass notes that I'm gonna be using. If I get rid of that, and then all the upper parts, that is what the bass line is gonna be generally, or in general. When I make it, it's gonna follow that kind of a structure. So literally what you can do is, or what we can do is just copy this up here, get rid of all the chords. I'm gonna put them at 0 so that I have a general idea of what's going on above while I'm making the bass line, so I know what's playing, because right here it's the same chords without the notes at the bass. So now when we play it, and I didn't check to see, yeah, I turned this down 12 as well. So it works all right. And of course this is a sub sound, so we can have the notes playing longer. It's not like an 808 where you want them to stop and be very short sounding. So we're gonna extend this stuff. So this adds like a lower end to the whole thing. Without it, it sounds kind of empty. And like I said in a previous video on how to finish some songs that you're stuck on, you want to be able to fill up the whole range. So right now I put a spectrum analyzer on the master, and as you can tell, it shows all the different harmonics, all the different sounds that are playing in your song at once. And just looking, I can tell that we're missing harmonics down in this range and then up here. So the next sounds that we're gonna add are gonna be up higher. But also I wanted to go ahead and show you guys another sound that I added. I replaced the electric piano with a harp sound that is inside the default library. I don't know exactly which one it's in. It's probably in strings. I'm not sure, but it's a harp sound. And it sounds pretty nice. It sounds like a Mura Masa type sound, which is why I added it. And I can go ahead and demonstrate what it sounds like in context. So pretty cool. I think next up, what would be a good course of action is to start on drums just a little bit, just the kick. I like to start with just the kick, just so I can have rhythm already set up for the rest of the instruments. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick out a kick out of all these samples, so I gotta browse a little bit and find something that sounds like him, and I'll be back. So I went ahead and added some basic drums, basically a kick and a snare at the beginning, and I went ahead and muted these harp clips down here because I'm going to add them later on in the song, and we're not done arranging everything yet. And I went ahead and got rid of the filter because I'm going to try a different progression, something more creative, and maybe even do some volume automation. But we can go ahead and listen to the instruments. I added a basic Mura Masa snare and a type of kick that he would use, and basically the kick in the beginning is at a lower velocity, and then at the drop I turn up the velocity. So that's something else that you need to keep in mind, is trying to emphasize your drop a little bit more. So play with velocity and with the, like I said before, the spectrum. Maybe you want to keep one part of the song with no bass and then bring in the bass at the drop. It adds some strength to your drop. I mean, everyone struggles with a different aspects of their sound or of their production, and that's just a tip that I learned as well over the course of my time producing. But let's go ahead and listen. And we're gonna add some more complexity to the drums later. So okay, we can hear it. Everything is nice, and something I want to do is change the drop chord progression because it's too basic right now. We want some complexity, and I also wanted to make some changes on camera to some of the instruments. You may hear that his kicks are like, they have this weird kind of soft tone to them, but they're still strong. Like it's hard to describe, but what you can do is turn up the fade, and you get this kind of weird effect where it's like a little bit softer. So what I'm going to do is on the drop, since it's at a higher velocity, I'm going to turn up the fade on the kick a little bit. So it has that kind of Mura type of sound. And we're also going to do some mixing on some of the drums as well. But anyways, let's go ahead and work on the chord progression. So when we listen, let's go ahead and unmute everything. It starts right away. I don't like that. So some strategies you can do is bring in some notes a little bit. So a little bit better. It has some movement to it, some rhythm. Cool. Alright, so I'm going to do this as well. Take down this note. Perfect. And then move this in as well. As you can tell on the black bar, you can see there's black, white, black, white. You can keep track of what you're doing by looking at that and do the same thing over again. Same rhythm, I mean. So we're going to bring it in 3. And then we're going to do something with this. Maybe move this note up a little bit. Oops. And then, of course, we can add some more complexity to this one as well. And get rid of this top note and flatten out the whole thing. So as you can tell, it's like I'm bringing it down, so I'm kind of adding some tension right there. At the end, it's not a full chord. I mean, it's a chord, but it has some, I don't know if it's diminished or what. I forgot the vocabulary for it, but we can go ahead and do that kind of effect. I'm going to copy this and move it here. Nice, we can have that going on. And another thing I wanted to do was sidechain the bass to the kick. So I already set it up. Basically what I'm doing is every time that this kick hits, it's gonna bring down the bass 32 decibels or whatever the amount is. And I turn down the attack a little bit, the release as well, and you're gonna hear it's gonna be a cool effect. So add some really cool movement to it as well. I think next, obviously this is not gonna stay like this, so we already experimented with the filter. So another strategy to create that wavy type of sound that's really has a lot of rhythm to it is to, instead of using an auto filter, you can automate the volume. And somebody told me this tip is that you can literally use a utility. I never thought about it, but instead of manually moving the volume like this, instead of selecting this and then changing the volume from here, you can, oh shoot, I'm not even, yeah, you, instead of changing the volume here and locking up the whole track, because then when you're done you can't really mix everything up, or else it'll turn black and your automation will stop working. Instead of doing that, you can use a utility which has the volume functionality on it, and you don't have to sacrifice your mixing ability at the end of the track. I never really thought of it, but that's really smart. And of course he likes to have some attack at the beginning of his sounds. And I'm so into this right now that I can't speak. Sometimes I'll stumble over my words and stuff when I'm focused like this. So you get this kind of cool envelope kind of thing. It's like an envelope everywhere you want to put one. So instead of going into serum and each time changing the attack or the release or the decay, you're manually controlling the volume. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and come up with a rhythm for this that sounds cool, and I'll be back in a second. Alright, so I came up with a cool rhythm for the super saw, and I mean, it's not amazing, it's not too crazy, but I tried my best, and I did some arranging as well, and we're gonna do some stuff with the bass as well, or with the sub in a second. I should go ahead and name all of these tracks real quick, but anyways, let's go ahead and listen. So I added a reverb as well. As you can tell, I bring up the dry and the dry knob every once in a while, just to add some cool kind of effects, just to fill up the full range. And as you can see right here, the harp is going to be added as well. But the thing is, I wanted to show you guys some cool effects with the sub. I never really go over how I do the basses and all that, so I mean, we can go ahead and listen real quick. I'll loop this first part, I guess, or this part right here. And so the thing is, when it starts out, it sounds kind of empty. It's just a kick alone, and I forgot to add this first note. So the thing is, in the massive patch that we made, we added some, I mean, it would be cool to have some vibrato as well, but we added a legato effect so that it would slide. So if I go ahead and change or select that and start playing it, you can see that whenever I overlap the notes, they slide, and this is the slide time. I kept it about the same. So basically, if you want to have that effect, you're gonna have to turn on the legato. But basically, we can start out by turning on this note, and as you can tell, it already sounds better than just a kick by itself. And then we're gonna do a slide effect downwards. Just by adding a note and making them overlap, it slides. So it's like a cool pitch down effect, kind of like a tape stop effect almost. And it's a good way to end off a certain point in your bass line to introduce another part. And then over here, I also did some more of that on the second part of the drop. And as you can hear with the sidechain, it's really crazy. It kind of clips it and makes it move and has all this movement in it. So yeah, I think that's basically it. I mean, at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and arrange some better drums. In fact, I could start doing that like right now on camera. So something he likes to do is make his drums very swingy and it's not a conventional type of trap kind of sound. And I'm kind of doing this out of experience. Like I kind of know where to put certain things to make it sound a certain way. Kind of sounds like a Oshi type of track a little bit. And I'm gonna go ahead and add a second snare real quick. Alright, so I added a second snare to the drum arrangement. And I added this sound as well as a hi-hat just to make it a little bit more interesting. But I think this basically concludes the whole structure of the song. I'm gonna go ahead and display the volume automation. That's the volume automation I used for the saw wave. And obviously this isn't like a professional sounding song all the way, and it was kind of rushed, but I wanted to put out a video and follow some of the tips to make a Mura Masa type track, since some people were requesting it. And I followed a simple kind of layout that I usually do in these videos, which is intro, the drop, which I'll color in red, and then the more complex part of the drop, which I'll do in orange, and then an outro, which I'll do in blue. So some basic song arrangement. In the future, maybe in longer videos, I'll have some more complex arrangements. You can check out some of my songs on SoundCloud, and I'll have the link to that in the description. And I'll have a new song coming soon as well that I'm working on there. But I've been so busy with YouTube, so it's been like 4 months, but it's coming out soon. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and add some effects and mix this and maybe master it just a little bit. Not spend too much time, but hopefully you learned something. If you did, go ahead and leave some feedback. Go ahead and leave some suggestions for next time and all that. And I will see you guys next time. I hope you enjoyed.